Xavier Vance was shivering, despite the thermal environment controls in the medical bay being set to 23 degrees Celsius. He lay curled slightly on the diagnostic platform, his skin flushed, sweat soaking through the collar of his jumpsuit. The human expedition member from Earth had started showing symptoms 6 hours ago: mild headache, fatigue, dizziness. Now he was burning up, and Dr. Rel, the appointed medical specialist from the Zhoren delegation, had no idea what to do with him. His dermal temperature is 99.2 Zhoren scale, Rel muttered in a flurry of quiet panic, scanning the display again. That's fatal, that's absolutely fatal. Xavier shifted, groaning. It's a fever, he managed, voice raspy. Just a fever. Can I get a blanket or something? Maybe some water. Rel's elongated fingers twitched in horror. You're delusional, you mustn't speak. Your internal systems are in full failure, your organs are liquefying, my organs are fine, Xavier croaked. I've had worse when I caught the flu in New York. You have been poisoned, Rel cut in, antennae quivering. Or infected with a progressive neural pathogen. I must initiate emergency containment. Xavier coughed once, then twice, and made a weak effort to prop himself up on one elbow. I'm not contagious, it's just a fever. Blanket, water, please. Rel spun around and slapped the emergency comm panel. Medic support, immediate dispatch, human subject reaching terminal destabilization. Initiate biohazard closure. Don't shut the… Xavier tried to sit up further, but his body wasn't cooperating. He slumped back, breath shallow. Oh, come on! The doors hissed shut with a sealing thud and a red light blinked overhead. The containment field shimmered into place. 15 minutes later, a second Zhoren technician arrived, armored in a full-body isolation suit. Rel met him with a frantic wave of its slender arms. He asked for a blanket, Rel whispered. The technician paused. What? He said he only wanted water and a blanket. As if that would somehow stabilize his internal combustion. That's normal, the technician replied slowly. According to Earth medical logs, elevated temperature is a common immune response. Rel's eyes widened. That's not possible. No biological system would tolerate this level of thermal deviation without catastrophic failure. Inside the containment field, Xavier stirred again, eyes half-lidded. Still dying in here. Or maybe just thirsty, he muttered. The technician approached the interface. We should give him the blanket. It's listed under standard human fever treatment. Rel hesitated, then turned to the supply wall and retrieved a folded thermal sheet. He tossed it through the containment slot with more reluctance than was strictly reasonable. A sealed cup of water followed. Xavier took both with trembling hands. Thank you, he muttered, wrapping the blanket around his shoulders and sipping carefully. You're still in critical condition, Rel warned, voice high with tension. You may not be aware of your own deterioration. I'm aware, Xavier said, closing his eyes. I'm tired, just let me rest, I'll be fine. Rel stepped back, watching him like one might observe a star about to go supernova. You'll be fine? Yeah, happens all the time, it's a fever. You sweat, you ache, you get cold, you drink water, and you sleep. Then it breaks. Rel stared at the technician. Breaks what? The fever, Xavier mumbled. He's delusional, Rel insisted again. We need to induce cryostasis. His brain activity is dangerously elevated. But Xavier was already asleep. By the next morning cycle, the fever had spiked higher. Rel hadn't slept. He hovered over the medical monitors, making minute adjustments to the atmospheric pressure, radiant humidity, and ion balance. Nothing seemed to matter. He's boiling, Rel whispered, pacing in tight circles. Boiling alive. I told you, humans can tolerate extreme internal temperature shifts, the technician said. They call it riding it out. That's not a treatment, Rel snapped. That's madness. That's surrender. Inside the containment field, Xavier tossed under the blanket, his face flushed, breathing ragged. The water cup was empty. Rel stared at it, uncertain. He needs more, he said finally, retrieving another glass. And another blanket. The technician handed both over. You're starting to sound like him. I'm adapting, Rel muttered. 2 days later, Xavier finally opened his eyes without immediately closing them again. He sat up slowly, the blanket wrapped around him like a cocoon. Rel stood at the foot of the platform, arms crossed, visibly exhausted. "You survived," Xavier blinked at him. "Yeah, told you I would. You had a lethal thermal overload. You should have suffered full systemic collapse." "I had a fever," Xavier said, voice hoarse. "It broke last night." Rel narrowed his eyes. "It broke nothing, your body simply resisted death, more or less." Xavier reached for the third cup of water and drank deeply. "Thanks for the water and the blankets." "I don't understand your biology," Rel muttered. "You didn't want medication, you didn't want sedation, you refused containment stasis. You asked for fabric and hydration. I needed my immune system to do its job, that's how we evolved. Sometimes you just gotta let the fever run its course. You were unconscious for 31 hours, Xavier nodded. "Sounds about right." Rel turned away, muttering equations under his breath. "You're a walking contradiction." "Yeah, well, welcome to Earth." Later that cycle, Xavier was well enough to stand. He still moved like his joints were filled with sand, but he managed to shuffle to the sink and wash his face. Rel followed him closely, datapad in hand. "I've begun compiling a research paper titled Thermal Tolerance in Homo sapiens, a case study of reckless survival. May I include you as a subject?" "Sure," Xavier said, drying his face. "Put me down as just needed a blanket and some water." Rel squinted. "That's not an acceptable treatment protocol." "It worked." Rel shut his datapad. "I'm going to need longer to understand your species." Xavier gave him a weak grin. "Take your time." Their ship docked with the orbital research station 2 days later. Rel insisted on escorting Xavier to the station's infirmary for a follow-up scan, despite Xavier's protests. Inside, the station's chief physician, a stocky Aurelian named Dr. Cass, examined the scan results with a puzzled frown. "Residual fatigue, mild dehydration, but all vitals are within acceptable range," Cass said. "He handled it well." "He was at death's edge," Rel insisted. Cass looked at Xavier. "Fever?" "Yeah," Cass nodded slowly. "Blanket and water," Xavier chuckled. "See. He gets it?" Rel threw his arms up and walked out of the infirmary. By the end of the week, Xavier was back on duty. He avoided strenuous activity, drank more fluids than usual, and slept a lot. But he was functional, alive, still cracking quiet jokes whenever Rel passed him in the corridor. Rel, meanwhile, had taken to carrying a small emergency thermal blanket and a water flask in his med kit. "Just in case," he muttered when asked. Xavier leaned against the corridor wall and smiled. "You're learning." "I'm adapting," Rel corrected. "There's a difference." Xavier nodded. "Fair enough." 6 weeks later, Xavier was assigned to a planetary survey mission on Alien 3, a humid, storm-heavy world with erratic gravity wells. The shuttle ride was rough, and the planet's atmosphere triggered mild allergic reactions in half the crew. Xavier was fine until a sudden downpour soaked him during a scan and he stumbled back to camp coughing. Rel was the one who found him huddled near the atmospheric generator, shivering under a wet coat. "Not again," Rel whispered, rushing forward. Xavier looked up, pale and sweating. "I just need a blanket and some water." Rel sighed and pulled both from his pack. The fever passed in 2 days this time. Rel stayed at his side the whole time, checking vitals, adjusting temperature controls, and handing over water without needing to be asked. "You're still reckless," Rel said once Xavier was sitting up again. "And you're still dramatic," Xavier replied. Rel nodded. "And yet here you are, again." Xavier gave a tired grin. "We bounce back. That's what we do." Rel looked at the human, the absurdly stubborn creature who survived internal temperatures that would have killed most known species, and shook his head. "I still think it's madness," he said. "Maybe," Xavier said, "but it works." And this time, Rel didn't argue. The corridor outside the medical deck carried the faint thrum of life support cycling through its daily recalibration. Dr. Rel stood motionless beside the diagnostics terminal, arms slack, watching Xavier Vance pace barefoot in a slow, uncertain loop. The human's skin had returned to its normal coloration, but the way he kept tugging the collar of his clean uniform suggested he was still running a little hot. "You shouldn't be walking around this soon," Rel said without looking up from the bio-monitor. "I'm not sprinting laps, just trying to get my legs back under me," Xavier replied. "Lying still too long makes everything lock up." Rel tapped the side of the monitor with one knuckle. "It's been less than 3 full rest cycles since your immune system finished its thermal escalation. You haven't rehydrated adequately, your electrolytes are still in flux. I've been drinking the station's rehydration packets. The blue ones taste like watered-down lemons." Rel's brow ridge twitched. "Those are designed for tri-segmented digestive systems. You metabolize them inefficiently." Xavier stopped pacing. "Well, they didn't kill me, so there's that. Possibly by accident," he grinned. "I'll take accidental survival over none." Rel pushed the terminal aside and turned. "You are the only species I've encountered that regards basic recovery as a casual triumph." Xavier sat on the edge of the examination platform and stretched his arms out with a quiet groan. "You ever had a fever before?" Zhoren do not experience fevers. Our thermal regulation is decentralized. If one node overheats, it severs from the primary system until equilibrium is restored. "Handy," Xavier said. "Humans don't have nodes. We've got centralized everything. If your body temperature spikes, the whole system rides it out together." Rel frowned thoughtfully. "That seems inefficient." "And dangerous." "Sure," Xavier said, "but also kind of beautiful. Like your body knows there's something wrong, so it cranks the heat until the invader dies. It's a gamble. Kind of like setting your kitchen on fire to catch a rat. That is not a sustainable strategy." "No, but sometimes it works." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I think I lost 3 kilograms in sweat." Rel's eyes widened. "You are actively pleased about that." "I'm not pleased. I'm just used to it. First time I had a fever like that, I was 10, strep throat. My mom wrapped me up in 4 blankets and fed me ginger tea until it broke. I hallucinated that my dog was speaking French." Rel blinked. "Did it help, the tea or the dog?" "Either. Not really." "But the fever passed." Rel paced a short distance to the sterilization alcove, pressing his palm to the filter plate. A faint green mist hissed out, cleansing his hands and sleeves. "I've been reviewing every human medical file available in the station's archive. None of your treatments make sense. You sweat out toxins, you starve viruses, you ingest fermented mold to kill bacteria." "Penicillin," Xavier said, nodding. "One of our best accidents." Rel turned. "Your species shouldn't be alive. You're an unstable collection of overclocked systems balanced on a narrow thermal band." Xavier leaned back on his hands. "But we're still here." There was a pause. Then, without ceremony, the medbay doors slid open and a Zalari technician slithered in, dragging a low hover crate marked with hazard glyphs. He paused when he saw Xavier sitting upright. "Oh," the Zalari said, blinking his vertical eyes. "You're not dead." "Not today," Xavier said. "Nice to see you too, Varnal." Varnal gestured vaguely toward the crate. "I brought the backup cooling coils. Dr. Rel said the human's heat emissions might have warped the neurothermal grid." "I was exothermic," Xavier muttered, "not radioactive." Varnal ignored him and turned to Rel. "Should I install them?" "No," Rel said. "His temperature has normalized. For now." Varnal leaned in closer. "Does he always do that? Turn red and drip fluid?" "It's called sweating," Xavier said. "It's how we cool down." Varnal recoiled slightly. "That's unsanitary." "It's survival," Xavier said. "You want to try jogging 10 kilometers in summer with no sweat glands?" Varnal looked appalled. "We don't jog, we glide. Must be nice." Rel waved a hand. "Go, leave the coils." "I'll log a maintenance deferment." Varnal gave Xavier one last wary glance before gliding out. The door shut behind him with a quiet hiss. Rel turned back to Xavier. "You should return to quarters, rest. Reduce activity until your nutrient levels stabilize." Xavier stood up slowly. "I'm fine. Just a little stiff." I've recalibrated your hydration rations. You'll receive 3 liters more per cycle until your plasma density returns to baseline. 3 liters, Xavier raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of bathroom trips, which will confirm renal function. Lucky me. Rel handed him a small pack from the side table. Also these, electrolyte supplements formulated for human metabolic pathways. Xavier opened the pack and peered inside. These look like lemon drops. They are lemon drops, synthesized from your medical logs. I hoped it would improve compliance. Xavier popped one into his mouth and smiled. Okay, that's suspiciously thoughtful of you. I have no desire to repeat this episode. Fair. They walked in silence for a few paces down the corridor. The lights dimmed slightly to indicate the beginning of a low cycle, the station's version of evening. Rel, Xavier said suddenly, can I ask something? Assuming it's not about sweat again, yes. Why did you stay in the medbay the whole time? Rel didn't answer right away. His pace slowed. Curiosity, he said eventually, and uncertainty. I've never witnessed a biological system behave like yours. I didn't know what would happen. Xavier nodded. Still, you didn't have to stay. Rel glanced sideways. You made it clear you didn't want sedation or isolation. It seemed unwise to leave you alone. Xavier's smile faded. Most people just assume we're tougher than we are. I didn't assume anything, Rel said. I observed and I adapted. They reached the junction where the habitat wing branched from the main corridor. Xavier paused, one hand on the wall. I'll rest, he said. Promise? Good, Rel said. Because if you destabilize again, I will initiate cryostasis regardless of protest. Duly noted. Rel turned to leave but hesitated. One more thing, he said. I've sent a request to the Interspecies Medical Council to revise their emergency protocols for human patients. Xavier raised an eyebrow. What kind of revision? Under acute thermal elevation, I've added the following. Administer fluid, provide insulation, and observe quietly. Xavier laughed, shaking his head. That's the most accurate treatment summary I've ever heard. Rel nodded once and walked away. Xavier watched the corridor lights dim further as the low cycle deepened. He tucked the lemon drop pack into his uniform pocket and made his way to his quarters at a slower pace, his steps lighter than they'd been in days. The lab smelled faintly of mineral disinfectant and something vaguely citrus, likely a new sterilization blend approved by the Interspecies Hygiene Board. Xavier had been told to report for a final clearance scan before rejoining planetary expeditions. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching a slow ripple of diagnostic light move down his body from the overhead emitter. Rel adjusted the lateral scanner and muttered something in Zhoren that didn't sound flattering. You don't have to keep glaring at the machine, Xavier said. I'm pretty sure it's not the one that gave me a fever. Rel didn't look up. I'm verifying that all organ systems are operating within accepted parameters. You still display residual inflammation markers. I stubbed my toe this morning. That is not clinically relevant. It was a metal chair leg. It felt relevant. Rel exhaled through his upper spiracle, a sound Xavier had come to associate with reluctant tolerance. The scanner chimed softly and retracted into the ceiling. You're cleared, Rel said, but I'm filing a note that your recovery window was shorter than recommended. I'll try not to sprint uphill through a hurricane without your permission. Rel finally turned, antennae angled forward. The human tendency to downplay physiological stress remains a source of concern. So does the Zhoren tendency to assume we're seconds from organ failure anytime we sneeze. Rel ignored that. He gestured toward the nearby cot. Sit. I need to recheck your muscle tone, Xavier complied, rolling his shoulder gently, left side still a bit stiff. Rel pressed along the upper arm, fingers cool and deliberate. You've lost minor mass in the deltoid and trapezius. Understandable, but not ideal. Guess I'll need to start lifting again. Rel tilted his head. Lifting what? Weights, blocks of dense matter. It's a human conditioning practice. That sounds inefficient. It's not about efficiency. It's about rebuilding strength through controlled resistance. Rel paused. You willingly subject yourself to strain in order to repair from previous strain. Exactly. Rel stepped back and made a note on his tablet. Your species' logic loops are exhausting. Xavier grinned. Welcome to the club. There was a brief knock, then the door opened to admit a pale-skinned Caerlean nurse with a tray of sealed tubes and a handheld analyzer. She moved with the usual fluid grace of her kind, placing the tray carefully on the side table before nodding at Rel. Serum sample, she said, voice clipped but not unfriendly. Rel gestured to Xavier's arm. Use the right, the left has minor trauma. Xavier held it out. It's fine. It's not, Rel said. You said so yourself. Xavier raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. The Caerlean nurse applied a local numbing patch, waited 3 seconds, then inserted a slim extraction probe just below the surface. The device hummed softly, drawing fluid into the waiting tube. That's better than the needles they used on Earth, Xavier said. Needles? Rel asked, watching the process. Yeah, hollow metal tubes. You stab them in and draw blood out. The nurse looked visibly horrified. You puncture yourselves intentionally. For diagnostics, Xavier said, and sometimes vaccinations. Rel stared. How have you not all bled to death? We apply pressure afterward. Gauze, tape, sometimes just a thumb. Rel turned away, muttering something about structural recklessness. Once the sample was secured, the nurse bowed slightly and exited. Rel sealed the tube in a containment module and placed it on the transport rack. I'll have this tested for secondary immune elevation, he said. Make sure you didn't trigger a latent response. Still paranoid, Rel looked at him. A week ago, your body attempted to purge an invader by incinerating itself from the inside. Paranoia is entirely justified. Xavier leaned back on the cot. It wasn't incineration, it was more like strategic overheating. Strategic, Rel repeated. You lost muscular density, neural efficiency dropped by 9%, and you hallucinated a conversation with your own reflection. I thought he was a decent listener. Rel didn't laugh. He never did. But his antennae dipped in a way Xavier was starting to recognize as reluctant amusement. They sat in quiet for a moment before Xavier spoke again. Thanks, he said softly. Rel looked up. For what? For not treating me like a liability. I know it freaked you out at first, all the sweating and shivering and blanket stuff. Rel folded his arms. It was less freaking out and more responding to a complete breakdown in biological logic. Still, you didn't abandon me. I considered it. Xavier chuckled. Fair. Rel stepped closer and studied him for a long moment. You're not medically fragile, he said at last. You're just biologically anarchic. I'll put that on my resume. Rel turned toward the terminal again. You're cleared for light duty, no exposure to high humidity or unstable pressure zones for another 2 cycles. I was hoping to join the next mineral survey. You can observe. No field work. Xavier stood, testing his balance. Deal. As he reached the door, Rel called out without turning, You were right, by the way. Xavier paused. About what? The fever, letting it run its course. Your immune response was effective. Xavier smiled. Told you? Rel glanced over his shoulder. It's still absurd. Absurd and alive. The door slid shut behind him. Rel stood alone in the lab, staring at the last thermal scan still flickering on the screen. He tapped the interface, running a playback of the fever spike, watching the temperature climb past what should have been survivable. And yet, it had been. He filed the final report under Resolved Anomalies, flagged it for cross-species medical training, and attached a single-line note. Human thermoregulation, functional, illogical, successful, recommend observation, not intervention. Then he powered down the terminal and left the lab. No alarms, no emergencies, no blankets needed. Everything was, for once, stable.